I came home from what was supposed to be a trip to heal my grieving heart, only to find a sold sign hammered into my front lawn and my daughter-in-law Brenda's smug face grinning at me from the doorway. My keys wouldn't work. She had changed the locks. "Carol," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy that felt like acid on my skin. "Mark left me the house. It's all in the will. You'll need to find somewhere else to live." She held up a piece of paper, a forgery I knew in my bones, but she was banking on the fact that a broken old woman wouldn't have the fight left in her. She thought she had won. But she and the new owners who were apparently moving in next week forgot to check one little detail tucked away in the county records, a 35-year-old love letter from my dead husband, written in the language of the law. If you're ready for this journey, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this a like so you don't miss the updates. And let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. It's always lovely to see where everyone is. It all started, as the worst things often do, from a place of love. My husband, Robert, and I bought this house in 1985. It wasn't much back then, a 2-bedroom bungalow with questionable shag carpeting and a yard full of weeds. But to us, it was a palace. We poured our youth, our savings, and our sweat into this place. Robert knocked down the wall between the kitchen and dining room himself, his face covered in dust, beaming at me with that smile that could melt glaciers. I planted the oak tree in the front yard the day we brought our son Mark home from the hospital. That tree grew up with my boy. Its branches held his tire swing, its leaves shaded our summer barbecues, and its trunk was bored the faint carving of his and his high school sweetheart's initials. Every room in that house holds a ghost. Robert's laughter still echoes in the study where he'd listened to his old jazz records. I can still see the scuff marks on the hallway baseboard where a 6-year-old Mark tried to ride his tricycle indoors. The smell of my grandmother's pot roast recipe still clings to the kitchen on a cold Sunday. It wasn't just wood and nails and drywall, it was the story of our lives. When Robert passed away from a heart attack 10 years ago, the house was what kept me anchored. He and I, we had one of those marriages that people write books about. 50 years of partnership. He was the planner, the steady hand, the man who thought of everything. I was the heart, the one who made our house a home. He handled the finances, the wills, the boring paperwork that made my eyes glaze over. "Don't you worry your pretty head, Carol," he'd say with a wink. "I've got us covered, now and always." I trusted him completely. Mark met Brenda in college. The first time he brought her home, I tried to like her. I truly did. She was pretty, I suppose, in that sharp-edged, manicured way. She worked in corporate marketing and had a handshake like a vice grip. But she looked at our home not with warmth, but with a cool, appraising gaze, as if she were mentally calculating its square footage and resale value. She'd make little comments, disguised as jokes. "Oh, Carol, this wallpaper is so retro," she'd say, wrinkling her nose at the floral print I'd so painstakingly chosen with Robert. "You know, a little gray paint and some stainless steel would really bring this kitchen into the 21st century." She saw our treasures, the handmade quilts, the collection of ceramic birds, the shelves of worn paperbacks, as clutter. She saw our memories as opportunities for renovation. My Mark, bless his heart, was blinded by love. He saw her ambition as drive, her criticism as helpful advice. He loved me, and he loved his father's memory, but he was under her spell. They married a few years after Robert passed away. The tension was always there, a low hum beneath the surface of every family dinner. She called Robert's study, my quiet sanctuary, wasted space. She'd push Mark to encourage me to downsize, to sell the house and move into a nice, sensible condo. "Think of the money, Mom," Mark would say gently, obviously repeating lines she had fed him. "You wouldn't have to worry about the yard or the roof." "This house doesn't worry me, honey," I'd reply with my hand on the oak tree outside. "It holds me up." And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me because you'll want to see how this plays out. The day I lost Mark is a black hole in my memory. A car accident. A drunk driver ran a red light. One minute my son was on his way home from a business trip. The next minute he was gone. The grief was a physical force, a weight so immense I could barely breathe. Brenda's grief looked very different from mine. There were tears, of course, for the public-facing moments at the funeral, but behind the scenes, her eyes were cold, calculating. While I was struggling to choose a casket, she was on the phone with her bank. While I was picking out a photo for the obituary, she was talking to a real estate agent. I thought it was just her way of coping, a practical mind taking refuge in logistics. Oh, was I ever wrong? A week after we buried my son, Brenda sat me down at the dining room table, the very table where Mark had learned to do his homework. She slid a document across the polished surface. "Carol," she said, her voice smooth and practiced, "this is Mark's will. He had it drawn up last year."
I looked at it. It was professionally done, full of legal jargon, but the long and short of it was this. Everything, Mark's savings, his car, and our family home was left to his beloved wife, Brenda. My name wasn't mentioned once. At the bottom was Mark's signature, or something that looked like his signature. I knew my son's hand like my own. He had a particular way of looping the K in his name. This loop was too tight, too perfect. "I don't understand," I whispered, my heart thudding. "Mark and I talked about this after his father died. We agreed the house would always be mine. It is mine." Brenda gave me a condescending little smile. "People say things, Carol, but what matters is what's on paper. He left the house to me. I have a buyer lined up and everything. The market is fantastic right now." The callousness of it took my breath away. A buyer? "Brenda, his photos are still on the mantelpiece. His jacket is hanging by the door." "Well," she said, standing up and smoothing down her designer dress, "you'll need to clear all of that out. I suggest you pack a bag with your essentials. The sale is closing in a month, but I'd like to get the house staged for photos next week." The floor dropped out from under me. It was a nightmare. This woman who my son had loved was not just grieving, she was seizing an opportunity. It was a corporate takeover of my life, and she was the CEO. We argued. It was the first time I had ever truly raised my voice to her. I told her the will was a fake. I told her I would fight her. She just laughed. "With what, Carol? Your social security checks? I have the will. It's ironclad. If you're not out by the end of the month, I'll have you legally evicted." I felt so lost. My 2 boys were gone. My house was being stolen. My friends urged me to take a break. "You need to get away, Carol," my friend Susan said, booking a cruise to Alaska for a small group of us widows. "Just for 2 weeks. Let the lawyers talk. You need to breathe." I was reluctant, but I felt so broken down that I agreed. The idea of clean, cold air and a quiet stateroom seemed like a small mercy. I packed a suitcase, leaving my lawyer, a young but very earnest man named David, with a copy of Brenda's supposed will and a key to the house. I thought that would be enough. I thought the legal system would see the truth. That was my mistake, giving Brenda 2 whole weeks. When I got home and saw that sold sign, a cold dread washed over me that had nothing to do with the Alaskan air I'd just left. The lock on my front door was new. My key was useless. Brenda opened the door before I could even knock. "Brenda! What is this?" I asked, my voice trembling. "It's a sign, Carol. It means the house is sold," she said, as if talking to a child. "The new owners were very generous. They closed in 10 days. Cash offer. They wanted you out immediately. I had all of your things, the clutter, put into a storage unit. Here's the key." She dangled a small, cheap-looking key in front of me. "The first month is paid for. After that, it's on you." This was it. The final brutal move. Selling the house out from under me while I was on a trip meant to heal from the grief she was now piling onto me. "You can't do this," I said, the shock finally giving way to a hot, hard spike of anger. "I already did," she smirked, and that's when she waved the will in my face. "It's all perfectly legal. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to meet the buyers for the final walkthrough. You really shouldn't be here. It's trespassing, technically. She made to close the door, but I put my hand on it. For a 65-year-old woman, I discovered I had a surprising amount of strength when I was furious. You forged that will, Brenda, and you're going to regret this. She just laughed, a sound like shattering glass, and shut the door in my face. I stood on the porch of the home I had built, a stranger on my own property, while my son's widow was preparing to hand it over to someone else. I looked at the mighty oak tree, its leaves rustling in the breeze, and felt Robert's presence beside me. I've got us covered, now and always. And that's when I remembered. Not a conversation, not a promise, but a piece of paper. A very specific, very important piece of paper, signed with a flourish by my husband, sitting in a safe deposit box at the downtown bank for the last 35 years. Brenda had the well, yes, but I had the deed. Standing on that sidewalk with the door to my own life closed in my face, something inside me shifted. The deep, foggy ocean of grief began to recede, and in its place was a sharp, clear, cold sheet of ice. Anger. I hadn't felt an emotion this clean and uncomplicated since Mark's death. Grief is a tangled mess of love and loss and regret. Anger is a knife. And my husband had handed me one from beyond the grave. I didn't try to call or bang on the door again. What would be the point? It would only give Brenda the satisfaction of seeing me hysterical. Instead, I walked to the end of the driveway, pulled out my cell phone, one of those simple flip phones that Brenda always mocked, and called for a taxi. My destination wasn't my friend Susan's couch or a sad little motel room. My destination was the First National Bank downtown.
As I sat in the back of the taxi, watching my neighborhood roll by, I didn't cry. I thought. Robert had set up a safe deposit box for us when we first got married. For the important papers, he'd said. The house deed, our marriage license, our birth certificates, and our wills. Not the fancy, updated wills our son's generation always seemed to be making on some legal website, but the original ones we had drawn up by a proper lawyer 35 years ago. The wills that stated, in plain English, that if one of us passed, everything went to the survivor. And if we both passed, everything was to be left in trust for Mark. Brenda's so-called will was a fantasy, a well-executed one perhaps, but a lie. She was counting on me being too heartbroken to think clearly. She was counting on me forgetting the details. But as the taxi driver made a left onto Market Street, a specific memory surfaced. It was the day we'd signed the paperwork to put the house in Mark's name. It was a tax thing, a way of giving him his inheritance early, Robert had explained, a deed of gift. Mark was about to get married to Brenda, and Robert wanted to make sure his son had a solid foundation. But I remembered an unease I'd felt. Even then, I'd voiced it to Robert that night. "But what if something happens, honey?" I asked him. What if Mark goes before we do? Does that mean, does she get the house?" I had no logical reason for my distrust of Brenda back then, just a gut feeling. It's funny how a woman's intuition is so often dismissed as over-worrying. Robert had patted my hand. He hadn't dismissed me. He took my worry seriously. He had the lawyer put something special in there just in case, he told me. It's called a reversionary clause, a little love note for you, embedded in the legal mumbo-jumbo. It says that the gift of the house is for Mark. It belongs to him and his family for as long as he's alive. But if our boy should ever pass away, the gift, it reverts. The ownership comes right back home to you, my darling. No questions asked. Automatic, like the deed teleports back into your name. At the bank, my hands were steady as I signed the ledger and followed the attendant into the vault. The air was cool and still. The box was cold and heavy. Inside, beneath old savings bonds and my grandmother's wedding ring, was a thick manila envelope labeled House. I took it to a private viewing room, and there it was, the official stamped deed of gift. I'm no lawyer, but even I could read the clause Robert had pointed out all those years ago. It was titled Special Condition of Reversion, and it stated clear as day that in the event of the death of the grantee, Mark Robert Miller, full title and ownership of the property at 427 Chestnut Lane shall immediately and automatically revert to the original grantor, Carol Ann Miller. I took a picture of it with my phone, my hands shaking just a little now with triumph. I packed it all back up and walked straight out of that bank and into the office of my lawyer, David Chen. David is a young man, barely 30, with kind eyes and a ferociously sharp mind. He'd been handling the initial challenges to Brenda's will, but without solid proof of forgery, it was a slow, uphill battle. When I walked into his office, he looked at me with pity, assuming I was there because I'd found out about the sale. "Carol, I'm so sorry," he started. "Brenda's lawyer just filed the transfer of title. I was about to call you. I don't know how she pushed it through so fast. It's unconscionable." I held up a hand. She didn't transfer a title. She transferred a piece of paper. You can't legally sell something you don't own. I laid the original deed of gift on his desk. He picked it up, his brow furrowed in concentration. He read it once. Then he read it again. A slow grin spread across his face. "Oh my God," he whispered. "This is a legal nuke, Carol. I know this part is hard to hear, but it's important. The truth was about to come out, and it was going to be glorious." "A nuke?" I asked, a little thrill running through me. "Brenda's entire claim to the house is based on Mark's fraudulent will," he explained, his eyes alight with the thrill of the fight. "But this deed of gift, supersedes any will. The moment Mark passed away, ownership of that house legally bounced back to you, instantly. It was never part of his estate. It never belonged to Brenda. She had absolutely no legal authority to sell it." He stood up and started pacing. "She didn't just sell your house, Carol. She sold a house owned by you to an innocent third party. That's not just a civil issue. That is fraud, potentially grand larceny given the value of the house." He paused, looking at me. "So we have a choice. We can file an injunction immediately, contest the sale, and deal with a massive legal headache involving the new buyers. Or," he leaned on his desk, his voice dropping, "or we can be a little more strategic." That's when I knew David was the right lawyer for me. He saw this not just as a problem to be solved, but as a chessboard. "What kind of strategic?" I asked. "Brenda thinks she just got a big pile of cash. The house sold for $800,000 according to the filing. She probably thinks she's home free. What if we let her believe that for just a little while longer?" he proposed. "We let the dust settle, we let her deposit that check, and then we contact the new owners, the title insurance company, and the district attorney's office all at the same time."
My heart hammered in my chest. He was talking about setting a trap, a beautiful, perfect, legally binding trap. "What happens then?" "Then," David said, a grim satisfaction in his tone, "everything comes crashing down on her. The new owners will sue her for selling them a fraudulent title. The title insurance company will come after her to recoup their losses. And because the sum is so high, the DA might very well press criminal charges. She'll be buried in so many lawsuits and legal fees, she won't even remember what her favorite stainless steel appliance is. And in the meantime, we file a quiet title action, which is a lawsuit that asks a judge to formally declare you the sole undisputed owner of the property. The new owners will have to vacate. The law will be on their side against Brenda, but the house is, and always was, yours." We spent the next 2 hours getting our ducks in a row. David started drafting the letters. I called Susan, explained everything, and arranged to stay with her. No more hotels. I was going to see this through from a place of comfort, surrounded by a friend. But as I was leaving David's office, a thought struck me. "What about the buyers?" I asked. "They don't deserve this. They're probably a family." David nodded. "You're right. We should find out who they are. It would be better if we approached them ourselves, before the lawyers do." A quick search of the property records online gave us a name, the Henderson family. We found them on social media, a young couple, Tim and Sarah, with a 5-year-old daughter named Lily. There was a picture of them standing in front of my house, next to the sold sign, all three of them smiling ear to ear. The caption read, "Our forever home. Can't wait to make a lifetime of memories here." My stomach churned.
This was the collateral damage of Brenda's greed. A young family about to have their dream turn into a nightmare. I knew what we had to do. I had to go and talk to them. I had to look this family in the eye and tell them their new home wasn't theirs. The thought filled me with dread, but it had to be done. It was the decent thing to do. My war was with Brenda, not with them. In fact, if I played my cards right, they just might become my most powerful allies. The drive over to my house, I had to keep reminding myself it was still my house, was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. My stomach was in knots. These weren't bad people. They were a family, just like mine once was, full of hope and dreams for their future, standing on the very spot where Mark took his first steps. And I was about to walk up to their door, like the ghost of Christmas past, and tell them their dream was built on a foundation of lies. David had armed me with copies of the deed of gift, my original title, and his business card. Let them be angry. Let them be scared. Just don't let them see you as the enemy. You're on the same side. Brenda is the enemy. I parked my sensible sedan across the street and just watched for a minute. A little pink bicycle with sparkly tassels on the handlebars lay on its side on the lawn, my lawn. For a second, a wave of such profound loss washed over me I almost drove away. Loss for my son, for my husband, for the life that was supposed to be. But then I looked at the oak tree. Robert had planted it for Mark. I planted it for him. It was my family's legacy. It was worth fighting for. I got out of the car. I walked up the stone path Robert and I had laid one blistering hot July. My hand trembled as I rang the doorbell, the same one I'd rung 1,000 times when I'd forgotten my keys. The door swung open, and a young woman with a kind, tired face stood there, a smear of what looked like peanut butter on her cheek. This must be Sarah Henderson. "Can I help you?" she asked, a friendly, open smile on her face. Behind her, I could see my living room was filled with cardboard boxes. They were in the middle of unpacking. My carefully rehearsed speech evaporated. "My name is Carol Miller. This ceased to be my house." She smiled, faltered, replaced by a guarded pity. "Oh, you're Mark's mother. Brenda mentioned you. I'm so sorry for your loss. It must be so hard to see the household. That's actually why I'm here. I'm afraid there has been a terrible mistake. The house was never Brenda's to sell." Her expression shuddered. The friendly mom was gone, replaced by a protective homeowner. "I'm sorry, I don't understand. We have all the paperwork. We bought the house legally." "I know you did," I said, my heart aching for her. "You did everything right. She's the one who broke the law. You bought a house from a woman who didn't own it." A man, who I assumed was her husband Tim, appeared behind her. He had a box cutter in his hand and a worried look on his face. "Is there a problem, honey?" Sarah turned to him. "This is Carol Miller, Mark's mother. She's saying that Brenda didn't own the house." Tim's face hardened. "Look, Mrs. Miller, we're really sorry for what you've been through. But Brenda explained everything. She told us her mother-in-law was having a difficult time with the grief and might be a little confused."
Confused. The condescension in his voice, borrowed straight from Brenda, was the spark I needed. "I am not confused," I said, my tone sharpening just enough to cut through their sympathy. "I am the legal and rightful owner of this property. Your purchase is void. My daughter-in-law committed fraud." I held out the file David had prepared. "This is a copy of the deed of gift for the house, which states that upon my son's death, ownership reverted solely to me. This is a copy of the title in my name, dated 35 years ago. And this," I said, pulling out David's card, "is my lawyer's number. I suggest you call yours." They stared at the papers in my hand, then at my face. They saw a grandmother, a grieving mother. They did not see a liar. The doubt began to creep into their eyes. Tim took the file from me. They stood there, in the doorway of my house, their dream, and read the document that was about to shatter it. I could see the blood drain from their faces. The legal language was dense, but the words "revert to the original grantor, Carol Ann Miller," were terrifyingly clear. Sarah looked up, her eyes wide with panic. "Is this real?" she whispered. "As real as the ground you're standing on," I said softly.
I didn't want to do this through lawyers. You have a daughter. You've packed up your whole life. You are as much a victim of Brenda's greed as I am. I'm giving you a chance to get ahead of it before the whole thing collapses." They invited me inside. Sitting on one of their packed boxes in my own living room, I explained everything. The forged will, the rushed sale while I was away, Brenda's cold-hearted ambition. They listened, a doting horror on their faces. They told me Brenda had fed them a story about needing to sell quickly to pay for Mark's extensive medical debts, and that I was an elderly mother in a fragile mental state who couldn't handle the upkeep of the house and had agreed to the sale before changing my mind in my grief. Every lie she told made my case stronger. She was about to get exactly what she deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. By the time I left an hour later, the Hendersons weren't just convinced, they were furious. Their life savings, the stability for their little girl, it was all at risk. They had been conned, and the nice young couple was ready for a fight. Tim called his real estate lawyer while I was still there, who, after a quick, frantic search of the county's online records, confirmed the deed of gift was a public, legally binding document. The Hendersons were on my side. We had a pact. They would be the shocked, innocent buyers, and I would be the grieving mother reclaiming my home. Brenda was trapped in the middle. I went back to David's office that afternoon. "Phase 2 is a go," I told him. He cracked his knuckles like a concert pianist about to perform a masterpiece and hit send on a series of emails. One went to Brenda's lawyer, politely informing him of the reversionary clause and attaching a copy of the deed. A second went to the title insurance company that had guaranteed the sale, informing them that the title was fraudulent and that they were now on the hook for the entire $800,000 paid by the Hendersons. The third was a formal notice sent to Brenda's home, a condo she and Mark had owned, letting her know of our intent to file a quiet title action and pursue damages. The fallout was immediate. We knew the title company would move the fastest. They had the most to lose. Less than an hour after David sent his email, Tim Henderson called me. A senior vice president from the title insurance company was on the phone with him in full-blown panic mode. The man had confirmed everything. They were asking for the Hendersons' full cooperation in their impending lawsuit against Brenda Miller. They assured the Hendersons they would be made whole, that all their money would be returned, but they needed to halt the movement immediately. The company was placing a legal freeze on the house. It was now evidence in a massive fraud case. Brenda found out, as far as we could piece it together, from her own real estate agent, who was probably getting screaming calls from the title company. That evening, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered it, putting it on speaker so David could listen in from his office phone. "You old witch," she shrieked, raw and ugly. All pretense of the sophisticated marketing executive was gone. "What did you do? My accounts are being frozen. My lawyer called me screaming, 'You can't do this.'" I held the phone, the cold ice of my anger, feeling very, very peaceful. "Hello, Brenda," I said calmly. "It seems you've sold a house that doesn't belong to you. That's a very naughty thing to do." "It was Mark's house. He left it to me. I have a will." "The will is a forgery, and you know it. But even if it were real, it wouldn't matter. Robert thought of everything, you see. He always did. He put a little love note in the deed just for me, and it means the house is, and always was, mine. You just committed felony fraud for nothing." There was a sputtering on the other end of the line, then a string of curses that would make a sailor blush. She was spiraling. She had thought she was rich. She had thought she was clever. Now she was a common criminal, caught red-handed. "I will see you in court," she snarled. "Huh. Oh, I have no doubt about that, dear," I said, and a smile touched my lips for the first time in months. "But I don't think you'll be wearing one of your designer dresses. I hear prison jumpsuits are a rather unflattering shade of orange." I hung up the phone. The first domino had just toppled over, and I knew the rest were about to fall. Very, very fast. The silence after I hung up the phone was profound. It felt like the calm in the eye of a hurricane. David let out a long, low whistle on the other end of the line. "Well," he said, "I think that went well." She didn't admit guilt exactly, but that level of panic is pretty much a confession. "So what happens now, David?" I asked, sinking into a chair at my friend Susan's kitchen table. Susan put a cup of hot tea in front of me, her hand a warm, steadying presence on my shoulder. "Now, the machine takes over," he explained. "Brenda is going to wake up tomorrow to a world of hurt. The title insurance company has an army of very expensive, very aggressive lawyers. They will sue her to get back the $800,000 they are legally obligated to pay back to the Hendersons. They will probably also sue her for punitive damages. The Hendersons, once they have their money back, will almost certainly sue her for emotional distress, moving costs, and all the chaos she's caused them. Those are the civil suits. They will bleed her dry financially." I took a sip of tea. It was a pleasant thought, her designer wardrobe being sold off piece by piece. "And the other thing, the part you mentioned in your office, the criminal charges," he said, his voice grim. "I'll be compiling everything we have, the deed, the timeline, a transcript of that delightfully unhinged phone call, and sending it to the district attorney's office. Fraud on this scale, $800,000 is not a slap on the wrist. They're going to take this very seriously. She forged a will to steal from a grieving mother. It's a prosecutor's dream case." It was strange. Hearing it all laid out should have made me feel elated, but instead, I just felt a deep, weary sadness for my son. That this was his legacy. That this was the woman he loved. I thought of the Hendersons, their lives in disarray, a 5-year-old girl likely asking her parents why they can't go to their new house. Brenda's greed had thrown a rock into a calm pond, and the ripples were spreading. The next morning, I did something my lawyer probably would have advised against. I baked a lasagna, a big, hearty one with my special 3-cheese blend. Then I drove to the extended stay hotel where the Henderson family was now living. Sarah answered the door, her eyes red-rimmed and tired. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week. Little Lily was watching cartoons on the television, her face illuminated by the flickering colors. I brought you dinner," I said, holding out the heavy pan. "I figured cooking was the last thing on your mind right now." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. She took the lasagna from me and motioned me inside. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "You're going through more than we are." "It's all part of the same mess," I replied, looking around the impersonal hotel room. "Nobody deserves this, especially not your little one." Tim came out of the small bedroom, a laptop in his hand. The swagger I'd seen in the doorway of my house was gone. He just looked exhausted. "The title company just wired our money back, every penny, plus our closing costs. They're paying for this hotel and our moving expenses. Their lawyers are, intense." "They're protecting their investment," I nodded. "But what about you two? Are you okay?" Sarah shook her head, sinking onto the edge of the bed. "We were so happy. We loved that house. We sold our old place. The movers have all our things in a truck. We have nowhere to go." And in that moment, my path became clear. This wasn't just about getting my house back and punishing Brenda. It was about making things right. I have an idea. It might sound a little crazy, but I'm going to need the house for a little while the legal mess gets sorted out, and, well, to get the feeling of Brenda out of it, I'll need to repaint, probably refloor, cleanse the whole place of bad memories. But I can't stay there by myself anymore. It's too big, too full of ghosts. I looked them right in the eye. "When this is all over, if you still want the house, why don't you rent it from me? For a fair price, we can sign a long lease. You'll have the stability you want for your daughter, in the home you fell in love with. And I'll have wonderful tenants who I know will love and care for the place." They stared at me, dumbfounded. Then a slow smile spread across Tim's face. Sarah started crying again, but this time they were tears of relief. "You would do that, Carol?" I said it was never my intention for a family to be hurt by this.
And besides, I added, looking at Lily, who was now peeking at us from behind the sofa, I think my granddaughter would have loved having another little girl's laughter in that yard.
We had her cornered, legally. But a cornered animal is the most dangerous, and Brenda was about to show us just how low she would go. A few days later, a delinquency notice showed up in my temporary mailbox at Susan's house. It was from a place called Lock It Up Storage. It said the payment for unit number 237 was overdue, and that if it wasn't paid, the contents would be put up for auction in 30 days. Brenda had paid the first month, just like she'd said. It was her name on the account, but she'd clearly canceled the automatic payments. Her plan was simple. Let my life's possessions be sold off to strangers for pennies on the dollar. It was petty. It was cruel. And it was the biggest mistake she could have possibly made. I immediately called David. "She's letting the storage unit go into default," I said, a new kind of fire burning in my gut. "All my things, my husband's things, they're going to be auctioned off." David was quiet for a moment. "Okay, Carol, let's think. We can pay the bill, but the unit is in her name. It complicates things. What exactly is in there? You called it clutter before." And that's when my blood ran cold. It hit me like a lightning bolt. Oh my God, David, it wasn't just clutter. When they took the furniture, I told them to just take everything from my husband's study. The desk, the filing cabinet, everything. Brenda wouldn't have looked through any of it. She would have just seen it as old junk. "What was in the desk, Carol?" David asked, his voice suddenly sharp with intensity. "Everything," I nearly shouted. "Robert kept everything. Old bank statements, tax returns from 20 years ago, and his file of official documents. He kept specimen signature cards in that file, David, for banking, for the DMV, for everything. I know for a fact there's a copy of Mark's signature from when he co-signed on a car loan with us when he was 25. A perfect, legal, notarized copy of his actual signature." The line went silent as David absorbed the implication. The fraudulent will, the tight loop on the K that had bothered me from the beginning. We didn't need to hire expensive handwriting experts to prove the forgery anymore. If we could get that file, we would have indisputable side-by-side proof. Brenda hadn't just tried to get rid of my memories. She had inadvertently tried to get rid of the very evidence that could send her to prison. "I have to get in there, David," I said, my heart pounding. "She could go there right now, clear it out, and destroy that file before we ever get a chance." "She won't," David said, his mind clearly racing. "Her accounts are frozen. She's broke. She can't even pay the $50 a month fee for the unit. She's counting on the system to destroy the evidence for her. But you're right, we can't take any chances." "So what do? Do we call the police?" "Better," he said, a note of grim excitement in his voice. "I'm calling the district attorney. This moves beyond a simple matter of forgery. This is now tampering with evidence in a felony investigation. We can get a warrant. We can have a sheriff escort us there and seize the contents of that entire unit as evidence." The fight for my house was almost over. But the fight for my son's legacy and the proof that would put Brenda behind bars was in a 10x10 metal box across town, and she was desperately trying to make it disappear forever. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in legal maneuvering. David was a maestro, and the justice system was his orchestra. He presented our case to a senior prosecutor in the DA's Economic Crimes Unit. He didn't walk in with a sob story about a poor old widow. He walked in with an open and shut case of felony real estate fraud, with a clear victim, me. A secondary set of victims, the Hendersons, who were more than willing to give statements, and an antagonist who had demonstrated clear intent. The deliberately defaulted storage unit was the cherry on the top, a brazen attempt to destroy evidence. The DA, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s named Jessica Riley, saw Brenda not as a grieving widow, but a predator. A warrant was issued by a judge that afternoon. The plan was for 2 detectives from the DA's office to meet me and David at the Lock It Up storage facility the next morning. It felt like something out of a TV show. When we arrived, the detectives were already there, talking to the manager of the facility, a nervous-looking man in a greasy polo shirt. He kept wringing his hands, terrified of the official-looking documents the detectives were showing him.
One of the detectives, a calm, broad-shouldered man named Peterson, introduced himself. "Mrs. Miller, I'm Detective Peterson. We're here to execute a warrant to seize the contents of Unit 237. The manager here tells us the unit is scheduled for auction next week. We got here just in time." They cut the cheap lock Brenda had put on with a massive pair of bolt cutters. The sound echoed in the cavernous metal hallway. The heavy roll-up door groaned in protest as they hoisted it open. And there it was. My life, my memories, piled in haphazard heaps under a layer of dust. My comfortable reading chair was upside down. Boxes of photo albums were crushed under a set of end tables. And there, against the back wall, was Robert's old oak desk and the matching 4-drawer filing cabinet.
It was an archaeological dig through my past. Under the watchful eyes of the detectives who were documenting and photographing everything, David and I began to sift through the chaos. He went straight for the filing cabinet. It was, thankfully, unlocked. The first drawer slid open with a familiar squeak. He started flipping through the hanging files, which were, in a testament to my husband's methodical nature, still in perfect alphabetical order. "Bank, bonds, car," David murmured. Then, his voice sharp with victory, "bingo. Documents official." He pulled out a thick file folder. Inside, preserved in plastic sleeves, were dozens of documents. Robert's signature on their mortgage application. My signature on a department store credit card from 1983. And then we saw it. A car loan cosigner agreement from when Mark was 25. His signature was right there at the bottom. Mark Robert Miller. The K looped in that familiar, slightly messy way I knew so well. It was as different from the signature on Brenda's will as a sunset is from a fluorescent light bulb. Detective Peterson came over. "Is that what we're looking for?" "This," David said, holding up the sleeve, "is the nail in her coffin." I sat down on an overturned box of my own kitchen pots and pans, a wave of profound relief and sadness washing over me. We had it. We had the concrete proof. There would be no doubt, there would be no escape for her. Brenda's greed, her laziness, and not even bothering to go through Robert's clutter had sealed her own fate. The truth was about to come out, and it was going to be glorious. The quiet title action for the house was almost a formality. With the DA's office now involved and the evidence of the deed's reversionary clause being irrefutable, Brenda's lawyer didn't even put up a fight. He saw the freight train coming and wisely jumped off the tracks. He dropped her as a client, citing a fundamental disagreement on case strategy. In reality, he didn't want to be anywhere near a client who was about to be indicted on criminal charges. Within weeks, a judge signed the order. The fraudulent sale to the Hendersons was officially nullified, and the title to 427 Chestnut Lane was once again officially and undisputed in the name of Carol Ann Miller. The first thing I did was call Tim Henderson. "It's done," I said, the words feeling sweet on my tongue. "It's my house again." There was a whoop of joy on the other end of the line. The moving company had been storing their things for free as a gesture of goodwill once the news of the fraud got out. They moved their belongings into the house that Saturday. I stood on the porch handing Sarah and Tim bottles of cold water as they directed the movers. Little Lily, seeing the pink bicycle come off the truck, let out a squeal of pure joy and immediately started doing laps on the driveway. The house, which had been so silent and full of sad ghosts, was filled with the sounds of a living, breathing family. My family, the new one that was forming from the ashes of the old. We'd drawn up a 2-year lease. It felt right. But the real show was yet to come. The district attorney convened a grand jury. They presented the evidence, the forged will, the expert testimony on the signature discrepancy using Robert's file as the exemplar, Brenda's frantic and incriminating phone call, the statements from the title company, and the damning evidence of her attempting to have the storage unit and its contents destroyed. The grand jury indicted her on 2 counts, grand larceny and forgery, both serious felonies. Her arraignment was scheduled on Tuesday morning. Susan and I drove down to the courthouse. I didn't go to gloat. I went to bear witness, to see this painful chapter of my life finally close. Brenda was there with a court-appointed public defender. Her expensive clothes were gone, replaced by a cheap-looking pantsuit that hung off her frame. Her hair was stringy, her face pale and drawn. All that sharp corporate confidence was gone. She just looked like a common thief, small and pathetic. When she saw me sitting in the gallery, her eyes flashed with a hatred so pure, it was almost startling. She pleaded not guilty, of course. Her lawyer asked for bail. The prosecutor, Ms. Riley, stood up. "Your Honor," she said, her voice echoing in the solemn courtroom. "The defendant, Ms. Miller, is an extreme flight risk. She has liquidated all of her and her late husband's assets. Her accounts are frozen due to pending civil litigation, but it's clear her intent was to abscond with nearly $1 million obtained through fraud. She has no ties to this community outside of this courthouse. We believe if she's released, we will never see her again."
The judge agreed. Bail was denied. The sound of the handcuffs clicking onto Brenda's wrists was the final punctuation mark. She looked over at me one last time, a tear of rage and self-pity rolling down her cheek. I didn't smile. I just met her gaze, a lifetime of memories, of love for my son and my husband passing between us. I had not sought this fight, but she had brought it to my door, and I had finished it. A few months later, to avoid a trial she knew she couldn't win, Brenda took a plea bargain. She pleaded guilty to both counts in exchange for a reduced sentence. She was sentenced to 5 to 7 years in state prison and ordered to pay restitution to the Hendersons for their trouble and to the title company, a debt that would follow her for the rest of her life. She was a convicted felon. She would never work in corporate marketing again. I live in a lovely little condo now, about 10 minutes from my old house. I go over there every Sunday for dinner. Tim grills, Sarah makes her famous potato salad, and I bring dessert. Little Lily calls me Grandma Carol and shows me her latest drawings. The other day, she showed me a picture she'd drawn of the house. There was a big yellow sun, my oak tree, and 4 stick figures standing in front of it. A man, a woman, a little girl, and a gray-haired lady with a big smile on her face. Our family. Brenda thought I was a confused old woman. She saw me as weak, someone to be pushed aside. She forgot that my generation of women, we are survivors. We have buried husbands, raised children, and managed households on tight budgets. We have weathered storms she can't even imagine. My husband's love protected me even from beyond the grave, and my son's memory gave me the strength to fight for our home. She tried to erase my history. Instead, she sealed her own fate, and in the most unexpected of ways, gave me a new future. Now it's your turn. Tell me what you think in the comments below. What would you have done if you were in my place?
My grandmother told me this story. Thanks for watching this video. Bye bye!